Hello, Central Oregon. Welcome to Talk Real Estate with Fred Johnson. I'm sorry, once again, I'm kind of playing with my board here today, and we're having a great time. Hopefully, you're having a wonderful time out there as well. Thank you. And I'm really excited about it. Welcome to Happy Summer. It's a wonderful time of year to be here in Central Oregon. Today, I'm pretty excited about today's show. One, we're going to talk about a couple of things. We're going to talk about defensible space. I think there's a number of you out there that may have seen the retardant bomber buzzing around town, a little smoke in the air. So it brings the threat of fire living in the high desert here back to us. As well as I have a guest in today, Fred Swisher. Fred, are you with us? Is your mic working over there today?
We'll just give it a try here.
I think that you're on now. So
okay, here I am.
There you go. Thanks, Fred. Thanks for being here. Fred is the owner of the Bend Pine Nursery here in town, and what we're going to discuss with Fred is a little bit that there's some options in our landscaping between the traditional lawn that we can all have, as well as the xeriscape landscape. So, there's a choice actually between having a bluegrass, lots of fertilizer, lots of water, mowing 3 times a day, and going all the way to xeriscape that we're going to be able to discuss with Fred. And we're hopeful that some of you callers may call in today in the event you want to ask some questions about some of the options or some of the selections that you may choose to make out there. And Fred, you can always go to the Bend Nursery, the Bend Pine Nursery, which is out on Butler Market Road, south of town, and you just go out to the 2-mile marker, and it's a pretty easy place to find. Fred is also accomplished. He's written a couple of books on Central Oregon landscaping, and that address some of the issues that you may want to get a copy of, and we can certainly arrange for that. So. Again, thank you for coming in today and listening to us. I wanted to talk about just a couple of things before moving on to the next, because I know that some of you enjoy talking about some of the market trends and what's happening in Central Oregon real estate. And there were some releases this week that came out. Basically, we're off, as I'm certain everybody's well aware, we're off to a good, strong start this year. But again, the new listings seem to be outpaced by the pending listings, which basically what that's saying is that the additional inventory that's being added to the market is being outpaced by the sales of that inventory. So we're really sort of seeing a downswing, and quite honestly, straight across the board, whether it's residential properties, residential with acreage, or just bare land. We're seeing a reduction in inventory. Which is sure to be reflected in prices before long. It comes back to sort of the same old supply and demand, and apparently the supply exceeds the demand, at least at this point in time, here in Central Oregon. So, a couple of the numbers that, here just a couple of months ago where we were carrying 466 active listings, we're down to 401. And what we're seeing in that activity, in that sales, almost 2 to 1, that price point between 2.25 to 3.25 outpaces every other sector in the market collectively. So we're selling an awful lot of homes, but as many people think that it's all high-end homes and overpriced homes. Quite frankly, it's the affordable sector of the market that's seeing the most activity, and as it should. And today also we have that came out in the newspaper today. Oh, another thing that was kind of interesting that came out this week on the 11th was that overall appreciation, which May to May, from May of last year till May of this year here in Bend, we've seen about a 9% increase overall. And in the Redmond market, they're seeing that as well. And from May to May in Redmond, the median price point went from $208,000 to $242,000. And in Bend, that median price is up at $325,000. So again, what we're starting to see there a little bit more is that we're seeing more of the people that are trying to find those homes in the affordable sector of the market being driven a little bit more to the Redmond market, because there's much more selection, particularly in the below 300 price point. And one of the things that I wanted to hit lightly before we take it away at the break is I wanted to just sort of talk about defensible space, because I think that it's one of the topics that we talk about an awful lot here in Central Oregon. And when we're talking with Fred here in a little bit about some of the different landscape options and all of that, obviously that too is a very big consideration. But I think that there's a couple of reminders out there that each and every one of us should keep in mind, particularly as we go into the summer season, and that, there's a 250,000 homes that are at risk from wildfire. And almost 2/3 of the 1,100 odd fires in the state are human caused, and so we kind of need to be aware of that. And such things as, though we don't allow it this time of year, but safe debris burning and what alternatives we have to burning. And the other one that I kind of wanted to bring up, which I think is one that's easy for us to overlook, is our barbecue safety. That's the one thing that really the vast majority of people use a little bit of open flame, and we really need to set those barbecues away from the house, away from the structures. We need to kind of clear the ground under those barbecues. We need to keep overhanging limbs and those things away from them, particularly if you're using charcoal, to have a garden hose nearby and handling those briquettes after you've had your barbecue is very, very important. To use a metal scoop, put them in a metal bucket. If you want to water them, fine. If you want to cover them and leave them in the metal bucket for a couple of days before you touch them, that's a wonderful way to go. And defensible space is really a little bit more of a, maybe a little bit more of a rural property issue. But basically what you want to do is surround your home by what is called, they have a 30-foot perimeter, which is called the primary ignition zone. It sounds very, very technical, but it's very easy. If you'd look at the shrubs and the grasses in your yard as a step ladder for the fire to get up into the canopy, now is a really good time to get out and rake, clean, prune, get things back away from your house, because we're really quite early in the fire season, and this would be a good time to get out there and to do that. So basically what you would want to do is use some fire-resistant materials on your home if you can, reduce the fuels around your home, and then, as we'll discuss here in a little bit, to plant some items and create some shade and create some area around the home so that it is resistant to fires going forward. When we come back after the break, we're going to talk with Fred Swisher about some of the landscaping options that are out there and how landscaping can add some value to your home as well as the livability of your home. I found it absolutely fascinating when Fred and I got together to talk about some of these issues that there were so many alternatives, and I think, quite frankly, that people just think that it's one or all, and there's nothing in between, and it's really quite intriguing that there are so many options. So. Again, our phone number here at the station is 541-388-1110. You can call in. You can always contact me direct on my webpage. You can go to AskFredJohnson.com. And when we come back from the break, we'll talk a little bit more about landscaping your home, some of the different options that you may have out there, and then we'll go from there. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hello and welcome back. You're at Talk Real Estate with Fred Johnson, and I'm here today with Fred Swisher. Fred, are you with us today?
I think so.
Oh, right on. Well, Fred's here, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about some of our options in our landscaping. And as I mentioned to you previously, we're of the mindset that there's one choice or the other, which is simply a regular bluegrass lawn or a xeriscape lawn. Is that correct, Fred? Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, you see some of that. And now these days people are talking about the sin lawn, the artificial turf type thing.
Well, how does that work?
And I have some complaints about that stuff. Number one, it's pretty darn expensive. Another thing is it's not really something that keeps you cool or is something that's biological either. It's just just what it says. It's synthetic. It's artificial, made from oil. It doesn't have any life to it. And I think landscape's all about life. Landscape's a moving target. You want to come out in nature. You don't want to come out and live on a plastic carpet.
Well, that's right. And so I guess what you're saying then is that the synthetic lawns just simply add the green color around your house for someone driving by, but doesn't really enhance the livability of the home? I
think I would say that. I mean, pardon me to my competitors, but I think, it's just too expensive and it doesn't really function as a landscape.
Well, and I think that that's one of the interesting things that you're going to share with us today and introduce to the whole discussion is that bringing in that outside space and making it part of the living space is really a key component to coming up with a good landscape plan. Would you say that that's fair?
I think that's true. I mean, I think most of our listeners have been camping or been to the coast or something like that, and one of the things that you really love about it is you open the tent or you open the door to the condo or whatever, and you let that in, and you feel like you're part of the surrounding area, and that's a good feeling, and you can have that at your house too.
Surely, and that's where sometimes, where we see the xeriscape lawn, it doesn't really allow for a patio or a living area.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if we wanted to go out and live in nature, why would we build a house and have a sidewalk and a driveway and a street next to it? You know, I mean, I don't think that's exactly zero.
Well, and you know, some of these things are phenomenally expensive. I know that I think, Fred, that you have some statistics about that little sidewalk strip that are out along the sidewalk and the curb. The maintaining of just that little bit of grass on all the homes.
Yeah, we had a client that did the math just in Northwest Crossing alone, and all those strips, and some of them have been, retrofitted to not be lawns, but all those lawn strips along the sidewalk, just in Northwest Crossing, if they were all lawns, would give water to 2,000 houses. They would supply 2,000 households.
Just that little strip of grass is the equivalent of 2,000 homes.
Yeah, if you add all those up and do the math. So it's a pretty significant amount.
Well, and that's amazing. You know, one of the things I'm certain that some of our readers out there are fans of the Ben Bulletin, as I am. And there was an article today. It's interesting how timely we are, but there was an article today on the front page of the real estate section that was talking about your landscape survival in the drought. And one of the things that it first said is that we wanted to restrict our water, and the easiest way to restrict the water is the fertilization. And the fertilization, that too is a fairly large expense for maintaining these yards.
Well, I mean, like the old style lawns, you kind of think about that. Like, why are we growing grass? I mean, we're not harvesting it, we're not eating it, we're not getting grain out of it. You know, some people laugh because they get it from, they take it and feed it to their chickens. Well, okay, but that's a pretty expensive way to feed your chickens.
That's a start, certainly. And then it said that, maybe you could maintain some moisture by growing it a little taller. And, keeping some trees. But one of the interesting things that did come out with this, and I think, Fred, this is probably right in your wheelhouse, is that for watering trees, that if you took a 5-gallon bucket and punched some holes in the bottom of it, filled that bucket up and allowed it to slowly water your tree, that was a good way to go.
And it's a deeper watering, too. So you wouldn't have to water as often, but it would be deeper and get down to the roots there.
Deeper and last much longer.
And that's kind of this, the idea, it probably is the idea behind drip. Because it's a slower, less pressure, but it delivers the water deeper where the roots are. So,
well, and I think that's one of the things that I'm certain that you're going to talk about here, as we move forward, is sort of that comprehensive plan of what you would like your landscape to do. How it interacts with your living space, how it increases your living space, and maybe a portion of that is the curb appeal and the entry of coming up to the home. I mean,
and this is a real estate show, and this is your expertise is real estate, and as well as I do that curb appeal is the key thing. I mean, if that sets a bad precedent, then you just drive by the house.
That's 100% correct. You only get one opportunity to make a good impression,
yep.
and then I think there should be some continuity between the outside and the inside.
I know. I totally agree with that.
Oh, excuse me. So and it sort of sets the precursor. So from a real estate perspective, I would think that the investment that one would do into a comprehensive landscape plan would be really beneficial.
Well, I do a lot of consultation work now. I never thought I'd do as much as I do, but it turns out people are starting to take they care about the dollars and cents. It's not 2005, 2006 anymore. They're treating money like it means something again. And if you don't have a plan and you start off on some direction, you might not get to where you thought you were getting.
So you don't think that maybe just going over to Home Depot and taking a cart and filling it up and coming home and creating a spot in my yard is the right way to go?
I mean, some people need that therapy, and I don't want to take that away from them. And sometimes sitting on one of those ride-a-mowers is good for you, I guess, but for the environment, it's probably not so great.
And so if you wanted to add value through that, there's other ways to do low maintenance other than vegetation. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, I think around here the drought-tolerant fescue is pretty much the key element. But you could have rocks. I think one thing, water features are a little more expensive. They're quite a bit more expensive. Let's face it, if you get a good one. But they don't use much water. I mean, they just recycle the water. So there you have water in your landscape, but you're not wasting it, and it's pretty.
Oh, and it creates an environment without reusing the water over and over.
And that can be a nice feature in a landscape. It can create a focal point and have some sound, kind of diffuse the sound of maybe the traffic or whatever. So water features have a lot of cool uses and applications.
Oh, you bet. And that brings that, you can actually place them such that you can see them from inside the house so that it allows that
I totally agree with
interaction.
That. I think that's key. I mean, if you're not going to be outside all the time, so you might as well have it be part of the interior of your house. Yeah.
So, one of the articles that I received here recently, and I think that probably you would offer the direction, Fred, that we would, consult somebody when it comes to some of the outside trees. One of the things that I saw here mentioned a couple of times was, fire resistant and drought resistant. And because trees add such an element to the property, it would be really nice to be able to, I guess, consult somebody on those trees. Is that correct?
I mean, I think that's smart to do. I mean, trees can actually keep your house cooler and keep it warmer if they're done right, too. I mean, and there's the fire element like you brought up earlier. I mean, the ponderosa aren't they don't tend to burn so easy. You've seen the black trunks where there's a fire and the trees made it. Whereas junipers, you can pretty much stick a match on them and they take off, So and that's with the shrubs are pretty bad too. And pine needles, I mean, people rake those up, and I think they should. They can be a hazard. So.
Well, they're real high in oil and they burn real hot.
Another one's the Lydia broom, that yellow kind of perennial type shrub thing. That stuff's like oily and really burns hot. So there's a few things you got to maybe watch out for those, and you'll be a little safer too. And
maybe keep them a little further away from the house.
Yeah, some people have decks and stuff, and they have some of that stuff right up to it. Well, that's not too good of an idea, because if you ever seen a deck burn, wow, once, like you're talking about the fire ladder, you get one thing started, get the deck started, and then the fire departments are going to be there for sure.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that, but that's part of the defensible spaces in that selection, in that site. Once again, we have Fred Swisher with us today from Ben Pine Nursery. Fred, what's your phone number out there? Maybe you could give us that.
It's 977-TREE, 977-8733.
97-TREE, that's great. And he's at the 2 mile mark out there on Baker Road. You can always call us here in the station if you have any questions for Fred. Our phone number here is 541-388-1110. Or you can contact me anytime if you have any discussions or topics of discussion you'd like to see at AskFredJohnson.com. And we'll get back after the break and we'll talk with Fred about some of the other issues coming up. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Radio, I'm Karen McHugh. Kickoff time for the Hillary Clinton campaign in New York City.
Well, I may not be the youngest candidate in this race, but I will be the youngest woman president in the history of the United States.
The rally was held on Roosevelt Island, a nod to the former president. She portrayed herself as an advocate for those left behind after the recession, a message she'll...
Hello, Central Oregon. Welcome back to Talk Real Estate with Fred Johnson. I'm here today with Fred Swisher from the Ben Pine Nursery, and we've been discussing a few different things about some of your options that you have with your landscape. Please feel free to call in if anybody has any questions that you'd like to pose to Fred. Our phone number here is 541-388-1110. And so, Fred, before the break, we were talking about some different things about how to bring value to your home through the landscaping, through the landscape plan. And one of the things that you referenced was that a good plan is well worth its value. Would you like to expand on that just a little bit?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think everybody's familiar with a plan on a paper like for a building. A landscape plan, my feeling is that can be helpful, but really the process of planning, because design is discovery, and you have to really take a hard look at it, and there's layers to it. And if you take a little time, the project turns out better. It's just a fact.
A little feng shui there. You kind of know where you're going.
You bet.
Okay. Well, that's great. And so So with that plan, someone such as yourself would then be willing to consult and come in and talk with somebody, assess their needs?
I mean, I've been doing a lot of consultations, as I mentioned. Some of them are for water features because, there's usually problems with a lot of the water features that have been built over the years. So some of them are with water features. A lot of people are converting over to low maintenance. Like we talked a little bit about low maintenance. We can talk more about that too. There's a lot of interest in low maintenance because you're using less water, but you're spending less money too. And I don't think anybody's going to argue with those two ideas.
Well, let's talk a little bit about low maintenance. So the way that you can use less water, is that through your plant selection or is that through your application of the water?
I would say both. Yeah, the drip is really smart.
Uh-huh.
I mean, and then you have things like around here we have some pretty cool rocks, and if a guy can set them or a gal can set them in a way that, accentuates, or you can plant around them. Well, rocks aren't, there's absolutely no maintenance whatsoever, and the longer they sit out, they weather, they get lichen, they have, they look prettier the longer they're there.
Uh-huh, they add extra texture.
So rocks can be a good thing. But, like contrast that to the sin lawns. Like, okay, well, it's green. Like you mentioned, people driving by, hey, there's a green spot. But they say it's 60 degrees hotter than a normal lawn. Well, that's no good. It's not recyclable. It's got poor drainage. So, that's a low maintenance option, but at a high cost, and it really doesn't, it's not operating on all cylinders.
Well, it doesn't enhance the livability, if you will.
Yeah, and it's not really functioning either, because if you don't have drainage, where's that water going to go? Mm-hmm. And if you don't like it and you tear it out, you're going to just throw it in the dump. I mean, it's not the same as taking stuff out to be recycled at the demo dump.
Oh, certainly, ecologically speaking, it's certainly a waste of time and energy. So if you let's say it was a perfect world, would you encourage a gazebo, a gathering area, something along that line as a focal point of your landscape plan?
It could be. I mean, I think that's part of the discovery process and design, is like you figure out how the place is going to be used. I mean, that's one of the complaints I have about the old bluegrass style lawns. Like, how many people, some people did use them. Some people have kids running out there, but then they're putting weed and feed on there, which is very toxic.
Uh-huh.
But how many people really use those lawns? So if a patio might be a lot more usable, it's not going to start on fire. You got that going for it. Have a barbecue on there, not have to worry about it. And it's usable. You go, you have whatever you have out there. You have some fun, sit around, have a beer, whatever.
And ultimately, you're in Bend, you're in beer country.
Yeah.
So, and whatever the case may be, wherever that patio or that gazebo is, it's less landscape to be maintained and
That's
for
true.
you to maintain.
It's funny too, like if you ever had like little gatherings or whatnot, and you have like one of those covered tent type things that's open, you can have an acre and you have that little covered area like a gazebo type feeling, and people gather in that area. So sometimes that's a real neat thing for groups.
Well, you bet it is.
Yeah.
You bet it is, and it keeps your house cleaner if they're gathering out in your yard.
Go outside.
So, Fred, maybe you could tell us a little bit about. You've written a couple of books here with you and your partner Sarah. Which one would you like to discuss first here? You've got Simple Landscape.
Well, Simple Landscape is the most recent one.
Okay, let's talk about.
And that's sort of in the zeitgeist. I mean, we're saying, how do you use less water? Well, Simple Landscape's one. Simple Landscaping, we talk about using the materials that are already on site. I mean, why haul stuff off? Like one of our clients had hauled a bunch of boulders off site. Now they want us to bring some back. So you can use a lot of material that's on site if you're creative about it. And of course, less water. And I think the drip systems are way better, and also the natives, like the native grasses. And there's a lot of choices with grass besides either fescue or bluegrass. There's ornamental grasses. There's blends. You really have a lot more options out there. Maybe some of them are more suited for here and better, but it depends on your situation. That's part of the design process.
So what you're talking about with the ornamental grasses is sort of the bunch grasses that grow up tall and have some different colors.
There are the
pods.
bunch grass ones, and then there's some other ones too. I'm not thinking in some of the names of them, but they have a lot of different kinds of textures and colors and sizes and shapes, and people like the grasses now. They're not just the ones you cut.
Well, I had no idea there was so much flexibility with that. Well, that's great. And so what did you do with your employee? Did you have your employee just load up the rocks and drive it around the block for those folks and then deliver the same
No, I
rocks
wouldn't
back?
have done that to anybody, but that's a good idea, though.
Well, so in keeping it simple, and one of the things that you mentioned is native. Do you like some of the indigenous plants and shrubs to replant those? Is that a good way to go?
It's funny around here. Like you try to replant a ponderosa tree, unless it's about a foot tall, you're going to have a hard time doing it.
I see.
And even if it is, it's going to kind of shock for a while. So Like a lot of the stuff, fescue, the bunch grass does transplant quite well. That's
Okay.
one thing that does. But kinnikinnick and Oregon grape and some of those things and manzanita, they're just you can't transplant them.
Do you know anybody that's ever had luck in transplanting manzanita?
I mean, I've done it. You have to do smaller sizes. You have to do when the ground's wet, and they can't be very big. And I've seen manzanita. We've moved them, and then 3 years later they die. Like they can die at any time. So they're frustrating that way. But there are some guys in town that are real expert at it. And if you want to give us a call, we'll hook you up or we'll get some for you. But there's a couple people that know how to do it.
That's great, and I've tried a couple of times, and I've never had any success with that shrub personally.
I would like someone else to do it for me.
Good for you. And so an awful lot of the ornamental orchards. I know I hit on it earlier today when I was talking about different trees, and we don't really need to go into it in any great depth. But an awful lot of the trees that people could select, let's say at the Home Depot or Lowe's or something like that, are trees that are not indigenous to this area and don't do particularly well in this climate. Is there anything that you could offer to that might?
I think that sometimes that's true. But I don't think the guys out there, they're nice folks or whatever, but they're not in the industry. Just because they got a job at Home Depot or wherever doesn't qualify them. They don't know where they buy them. They don't know how to plant them. Like maybe somebody tells them that, but they don't have the experience.
Sure.
And that experience counts for something.
Well, I would think that experience counts for a fair amount, and when we look at those, I like everybody else have gone out and purchased plants, and it resorts only to looking at the little card on the back to find out which zone that they do well in, and you hope that you hit the right zone.
Yeah, and that's a moving target too. The way the global climate's changing. I know in the Bronx Botanical Garden in New York, they have a section where they have all new plants that didn't used to grow there 10 years ago.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
Well, it seems that too is, I guess, a bit of a moving target is the term that you like to use there. Well, Fred, thanks so much for sharing that. Do you know of some of the drought-resistant shrubs that are in our area? Do you know any that work better than others?
On the shrubs, I would say come out to the nursery and talk to Sarah because she's the one that's buying stuff. She's the one that's planting stuff. She's helping people when things aren't working.
She's the brains of the operation.
Well, I think you got to go to people that's what they do.
Okay.
And she does that all the time. I do rocks, I do water features,
Uh-huh.
I do the kind of structural landscape stuff, and then I do the consultation. And I've been writing books. I'm working on a third book now. I've been working on it for a couple of years. So.
Well, great. Well, maybe when we come back, you can help with some of the myths and tips of the 55 myths and tips that you have here in your first book.
I'd love to,
and maybe give us a little bit of insight onto your second book. You're here with Talk Real Estate with Fred Johnson. Our guest today is Fred Swisher with Bend Pine Nursery. Fred's been talking to us about some of the landscape alternatives and options that you may have between xeriscape and a traditional lawn. Anybody that would like to call in, please feel free, 541-388-1110. Or you can always contact me direct during off hours on my webpage, which is askfredjohnson.com, if you have any topics or areas of interest there that you would like to discuss. This week we've had a number of really hot issues here in town, and I feel real fortunate to have sort of a lighthearted approach in today's show. Talking about landscape and talking about defensible space and some of the things that are key. As the season progresses, we'll get into some of these more hot and publicly discussed topics, such as the college issue went through today, and urban growth boundary, and we have a number of different issues that are coming up. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you after the break. Hello, Central Oregon, and welcome back. You're with Talk Real Estate with Fred Johnson. And today I've got Fred Swisher in the office with us today. Fred, are you still with us?
I'm here.
Oh, perfect. We've been talking about landscape, some of the different landscape alternatives that we have out there. And, oftentimes landscape and the value of landscaping is underestimated. Would you say that's true, Fred?
I totally think so. I mean, I may be biased, but I actually think so. The reason is, think about this one. I mean, how much does it cost? You tell me what a typical square foot of a house costs. What is it?
Oh, sure. Today, in today's value, boy, if you go over to Northwest Crossing, it can be up $300 a square foot. But, really throughout the town, $200 a square foot,
so
all inclusive.
If you could get a patio or a deck or a landscape for under $10 a foot and have it right next to footage that's $300 or $200 a square foot, that's pretty sweet deal.
Well, that's a great value.
So there's one way it's underestimated.
Uh-huh.
Another way I think is, the environment, our environment affects us. That's just a scientifically proven fact. And if you have a nice environment around you, you're going to feel better, you're going to have more fun, you're probably going to do better. So a landscape is really an important part of your life.
Well, I think I'd have a lot of fun. We've been talking all day about ease of maintenance. The less time I'm spending behind the lawnmower, the more fun I can have.
Well, a lot of people used to like that, and I guess there's I think a lot of the landscape contractors, the old timers, they put in the irrigation like, hey, look, I can put in irrigation. I've got this skill, and we'll make the water flow, and I know the valves and the timers and all this kind of stuff. But how about this? What if you didn't have to do all that? How about do something else? Make a water feature, make a rock garden, have edible landscapes like you were talking about earlier. Have apples or whatever. Have a little raised bed and have some salad stuff grown in there for part of the year. I mean, that's a great way to use your space, and then you can grow something that you use.
Well, I think all in all, what you're saying is that a good plan and a good investment into your landscape will make it a much more interactive environment with the home and in your quality of life. I think
that's exactly right. I mean, when I think of design, I think you got to look at the site, you got to look at the neighborhood. Like some of these places, you don't really need to worry about fire stuff from the out external. Well, some of the places that are in the forest, clearly that's true. So it depends where you live, and different sites are different ways. Different sizes, different contours. Some of them are more vertical than others. Some of them are just plain flat and boring. So it depends what you're starting with the site, but who's going to live there? What kind of lifestyle do they have? What kind of lifestyle do they want? So you take all that stuff in consideration. You use somebody like me or some of the other designers that have been around a while, and we have ideas that have proven to work. And you put those three factors together: the site, the client, and the experience, and then you come up with the design. You discover a good design.
Well, that's great. And it's great that we have people like you out there in our community, because myself, before we met, Fred, in all honesty, I thought that it was, one or the other. Either you had xeriscape, you had basically a space out there that you wouldn't use at all that was covered with, rocks and dry shrubs, or you had a lawn that you had to maintain. And it's really nice to know that there's some different options. But one of the things that maybe some of our listeners might be able to appreciate is if someone were going to, if they had their existing landscape and they were thinking about taking their home to market and they were going to get it ready for market, what are some just easy tips that they might want to consider before bringing their home? Putting their home on the market.
Well, I think the entry, like we talked about before, is so key. And here's one of the things that's good about an entry is it's really not that many square feet usually. So you can dress up an entry, you can get a lot more bang for your buck, and it's going to have more impact anyway. So it's sort of doubly smart to do an entry. Another thing I think is you really got to clean up a place. You probably know this more than I do as selling houses.
Declutter.
You get that stuff out of there. And that's hard to do. Maybe you have to hire someone to do it, but nobody wants to look at a trashy place.
Sure.
And things collect after people have lived there. I know we did a project for a friend, and it was a $5,000 cleanup on a 2.5 acre lot, and
wow.
He lived there like 35 years and through a marriage,
and
whatever. But I mean, it's like, and there was stuff there where he had a pile of pine needles and really pitchy pine trees that were right next to his house. It would have just taken a cigarette butt or something, and the whole place would have went up.
It just takes one mistake.
So some of those kind of things you got to do. Take care of those.
So it's a little bit more than just hanging a flower basket by the front door and figuring that's going to take care of it. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, you could do that. I think this one thing you're saying there is smart. Is like get some smells, because smells. Like I know that people cook, cookies and whatnot, cook bread or whatever. But how about some fresh flower smells when they come into the place?
Sure, and the color. The color always helps and draws the eye there. One of the things that I want to get to before the end of our show today, Fred, is I guess your first book. You're going to tell us maybe a little bit about your topic of your third book, but your first book was 55 Myths and Tips and Secrets.
And that's one that Sarah helped me with.
Oh, she did help
and
you
she's
with
the plant expert, by the way.
Oh, well, that's good to know. That's great to know. But it was interesting in the myths and tips. So if you will, I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions here that. It says, it starts right out with anyone with a shovel and a pickup truck can landscape.
I say false.
False. That's a that's a myth.
Yeah, okay.
You're going with that. And landscape is generic. It's not a one size fits all.
Well, I think
is
that's
it?
what you were saying. That's almost like the emperor has no clothes or whatever. Everyone for so long, for so many years, just defaulted to lawns with watering systems and with lawnmowers. That was just the default choice. It was a cultural hallucination. And now we're waking up.
Now we're doing something different. This is one that I've had some personal experience with, and maybe you can help build on this. We have topsoil here.
I think that was when the volcanoes burped as dust.
We have dirt. I think that's correct, right?
Maybe.
We don't have soil.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's something too that
you might want to supplement it. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good. And I know that this one hits a lot of people. A lot of frustration that we feel here in Central Oregon is what the deer will eat.
Yeah, just about everything, huh?
It seems that they really like tulips.
There's things they don't eat, and there's places they don't want to go so much. And it depends on if you have dogs, what neighborhoods you're in. I mean, but that's one of the things that's going to be in my future book. We're going to talk about deer a little bit, but yeah, they can certainly be a problem.
Okay, well, let's talk about that for just a moment. What's the topic of your new book? What are you going to be writing about?
It's called Landscaping Wars, and
Yes.
and it's 10 top traps, things that people fall into. Like one of them is just this thing we're talking about, where there's a design. It has to do with bluegrass and sprinklers, and that's all there is. And that's a terrible way to start the game right there. And then thinking that all landscapes are generic, like we just mentioned, that if you get a contractor and you get a bid, then if it's higher or lower, it's all the same thing, but it's not all the same thing. Because the weird thing about landscaping is you don't know what you got until you're done with it. You go to buy a car, you sit in it, you drive it, you heard about it, you get reviews on it. A landscaping, you're never, and even when you're finished, you're not finished because it's a moving target. It'll keep growing for you.
Well, and so when you're out there, if someone were to explore this with yourself or one of the other contractors that are in our area, maybe there's a couple of questions you would recommend that they might want to ask their contractor.
How about this? Is it really going to be finished when I pay the bid? Because a lot of times they're not. There's a lot of lowballing. There's a lot of I said I'd do this in the bid, but you may have needed this, but I didn't put it in the bid.
I see.
So you want to make sure you've got a comprehensive thing going. And you can do things in stages, but again, that gets back to planning. If you didn't plan for it, then you're going to have a lot more stages than you had hoped.
Oh, so what you would recommend there then would be sort of a comprehensive plan, if you will, that was sort of the plan, and then maybe you could do some of the different points in stages.
Like if maybe somebody would plant their trees first and then want to excavate later. Well, that would be a bad direction to do it in. So you do the first, like planting trees and getting them rooted. Maybe that would be smart to do first, depending on what the first step should be for that particular job.
And then maybe have a space for the water feature that you could add at a later date.
Yeah, when you get some money again.
Well, that's great. Well, Fred, it's been an absolute joy having you in today. Again, we're with Fred Swisher at Bend Pine Nursery. You can contact him online at benpinenursery.com. And again, your phone number was
my phone number is 382-5188 for landscape stuff.
Okay.
For the nursery, it's 977-TREE.
977 trees, and you can always go out to the nursery and see them at the 2 mile mark on Baker Road.
Yep.
Fred, thanks so much for coming in. We really appreciate you being here today.
It's been great being